I'm Pete Rodrigue. I graduated from the MS CAPP program in 2020, and I work at the EPA at their headquarters in DC on global warming and ozone depletion specifically.
Very cool. So we'll talk a bit about EPA first, and then we'll kind of go backwards and talk about Harris and your time there and any other experiences that you had. So first up, EPA. Can you talk a little about what you actually do and what your typical day may look like, or some of your main responsibilities?
Sure. Yeah. So I work specifically in the Stratospheric Protection Division, which is part of the Air Office. No, you used to work at EPA, but for other people on the call who have not, there's basically 4 big offices: air, water, like land, and then chemicals. So it's like a weird version of Avatar: The Last Airbender. And our office was responsible for phasing out CFCs, which you might remember is like the hairspray stuff. It was actually much more complicated than that, but that's the gist. And then twist, the stuff we replace CFCs with are terrible for global warming. So now we're phasing those out, hydrofluorocarbons, or HFCs. And we have new statutory authority, which is kind of crazy. In 2020, Congress granted us the authority to phase down HFCs. So I do a lot of stuff because there's only 20 people in our office, which is 25. Our office is growing, but it's still kind of crazy that the US federal government puts between 20 and 30 people on closing the ozone hole. It's not enough people. So I do some data analysis stuff, which we can talk about. I also helped draft parts of the cap and trade rule that we're implementing right now in my 3rd month on the job. So yeah, it's cool. It's a small office. It's pretty dynamic. So I think the main thing I'm doing right now is helping implement this cap and trade program for HFCs, which we can go into more detail, but that's the gist.
That's very cool and sounds very important. So you said your team is pretty small. How often do you work with other teams across EPA, or are you pretty siloed in with your team?
Yeah. So without just screen sharing the EPA's org chart, so every office has programs, if I'm remembering this correctly, and then there's divisions within those. So I work a lot with our sister division, the climate change division, because they collect a ton of data on HFC importation and production, which we use to calculate how many allowances or permits the companies would get in the cap and trade program. Yeah, which I guess I should say it's an allowance, allocation, and trading program. We don't refer to it as a cap and trade program, but I'm just going to refer to it that way because people know what cap and trade is.
So can you talk a little bit about your journey to ending up at the EPA? Is it something that you kind of always wanted to do? Did you just interview after graduating? How does that look?
Yeah, no. I mean, I think I can give a sort of values answer to that. Would that be helpful?
Sure.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So yeah, I don't think people necessarily need a deep personal experience to work in environmental stuff. Everyone is impacted by it, and the work is sort of interesting in its own right and important. So I just want to preface this by saying that. But yeah, my mom is a landscape architect. She can walk down a street and name all of the plants and their Latin names. I think I had a lot of formative experiences just outdoors, in the desert or in the woods. And then, yeah, just my dad's family lives in Louisiana. Some of them live in very proximate to Cancer Alley and have died at very young ages from basically blood cancer. And obviously you can't point to that and say oh, it's because of these large chemical plants, but it's, it doesn't seem wholly unrelated. I'm not making a scientific claim there, but yeah, I think that's it's just something I think about a lot, I guess. Like my family in Louisiana is sort of directly impacted by some of this stuff. And then also just living in Los Angeles, I lived like at the intersection of several freeways in LA, and would just wake up and there was like a fine layer of like particulate matter just like over everything in my apartment. And biking everywhere. I just think air pollution specifically is something I think about a lot. So I think that's like why I'm interested in environmental stuff in general. And then EPA specifically is just, it's like a large institution that can improve the environment if we do our jobs well. So I think that was why the EPA specifically was appealing.
You talk a little bit about your experience of applying to work with the federal government. It is a long and arduous process. Any tips or tricks for anyone who's interested in doing that for after graduation?
Yeah. I guess one nice thing about federal hiring is that it's, I don't want to say it's meritocratic, because like nothing in the US job market is purely meritocratic. And it would be sort of self-interested for me to claim that. But it's a very like, there's a very standardized process for getting hired. And you really do just have to apply on like usajobs.gov. You have to use the like weird resume format that the federal government makes you use. Which that's a big flag. If you're thinking about applying for federal jobs, like make sure you submit the silly resume format that they want, because it's like different from everything else. And if you don't do that, they just like don't necessarily look at your application. So I did say that's the big thing. Like your resume has to be in the right format, and you basically just have to go through USA jobs. They don't have like word of mouth hiring in the way that like other places do.
So then were you just scrolling through USA jobs and found this, or were you kind of always checking to see when a job like this would be open?
No, yeah. So I think pretty much every job I've ever gotten hired for before this one, I like knew someone who worked at the place I was trying to get hired. Actually, that's not true. One other job that wasn't true, but many of them. This one, yeah, I was literally just like, I Googled it and like landed in this office or division. And I got very lucky, honestly, because like my coworkers are great. And not every part of EPA has like new statutory authority to like build new regulation frameworks. We just happen to have that, which is not unusual, but not something you see every day at EPA.
Yeah, so you said you had some really great coworkers. Can you talk a little bit more about what you think is like the best part of working there, and then what have you found to be really challenging?
Yeah, I think one of the best things is there's such a like wide variety of expertise on our team. Like I work every day with like physical scientists, like chemists, like people. I'm not sure the person I'm thinking would call himself an atmospheric scientist, but he like kind of is. There's a guy on our team who's like an engineer and a lawyer. So that's just very cool. Yeah, and I think I had some biases coming into this job about the federal government. I'm not gonna lie, like I had worked a hellacious, like not in that it was bad, but just it was hard job on a 2020 campaign in Utah. And I was honestly looking for a little more work-life balance. And then like everyone on my team works like insanely hard. Like my boss works like 12-hour days regularly. So yeah, I guess maybe that's another way of saying like you have to create work-life balance for yourself. It won't just be like handed to you. But I actually think that's like both a good thing and a challenging thing, because like I love how dedicated everyone is. There's also I think people struggle a little bit with burnout, especially in a job that's like very mission driven. Because yeah, it's like if we don't answer whatever email it is, like it just will go unanswered. or if we make a mistake, it's like millions of metric tons of carbon dioxide that are going to be released into the atmosphere. So the stakes are pretty high, I guess.
Yeah. So obviously EPA has gone through some ups and downs over the past couple of years. Can you talk a little bit how your company culture feels? I know I've read many articles about EPA being very low in morale. How do you feel now, especially with this new legislation that you're working on? What does it feel like on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah. I think there's like a couple ways I could answer that. Honestly, like the overall, I'm sure the overall like administration and political climate filters down to my everyday experience, like my team's everyday experience, but I don't think that's like something that's super visible for me, just because it's operating at the level of like the political appointees. So I'm not sure I can give like a great answer to that part, but yeah, I don't know. Like my boss has worked in our division since like 2004 or something, and then my boss's boss, she literally like helped with. I'm pretty sure she helped with like the like original CFC phase down. So like they just have like an insane body of knowledge, and that's like very satisfying, and like it's just cool to see. They like know everything. Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. We can move on to Harris. So you graduated in 2020, and you were in the MESCAP. Is it? You say MESCAP? Is that how you pronounce the acronym?
Yeah, good question. I always said MSCAP, but
I don't know. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you studied and what you were focusing on, and then we'll talk a little bit more about your time at Harris.
Yeah. I mean, I like all MSCAP students. I did the sort of like 121 sequence, which was super helpful. Yeah, I like did coding stuff before coming to Harris, but in retrospect, it was like, wow, that was not best practice. Like my code was a mess. It was like incredibly inefficient. And I like pity the research assistants in my previous jobs who have to use my code base before I went to Harris. Like, yeah, that's rough. But I mean, beyond that, I think the big thing that stands out when I just think back to like grad school was working with Eyal Frank. Like I was a DRW Fellow, and was basically an RA for Eyal, and like that was just super fun, and I learned a ton. So yeah.
Sure, we can jump into that part while we're there. What did you do with him, and did you like learn anything that really has stayed with you, or anything like that?
Yeah. I mean, I definitely learned like new tools. So like I used some Python packages I hadn't used before. I did some new stuff in R. So I think that the technical stuff was definitely helpful. But honestly, it was just fun to learn about the different ways in which like the environment comes back to like bite humanity in the ass a little bit. Like we had this one project, which maybe he's still doing. Hopefully I can talk about this, where these farmers in India give their cattle a certain drug called, I think it's called diclofenac, when they get sick. But it happens to cause kidney failure in vultures, which is like a huge problem because often the cows end up dying anyway, despite getting the drug. And then the vultures try to eat the cows, and then the vultures die. So there's like a huge population collapse in vultures in India right now. And the upshot of that is the other like type of animal that eats like decaying like carcasses is feral dogs. And because there's so fewer vultures, there's way more feral dogs, and feral dogs have rabies. So like human rabies cases have like skyrocketed or whatever in India. or in certain parts at least. So I could give like 12 examples of stuff like that, but it's just like crazy how we like don't think about like ramifications of what we're doing, and like when we like tweak a certain part of the environment, and then just like crazy stuff happens. So yeah, I don't know. That was just like always interesting to learn about.
I'm not familiar with that work, but that is very interesting. I'm just gonna plug in a link to the DRW Fellowship, so if anyone else is interested in that, they can see that. Otherwise, there you go. So cool. Did you do, I just like to ask, did you do any other types of interesting or formative internships or fellowships, either during undergrad or graduate school or between, that you want to talk about?
I also did some like side work for a PhD student at Harris who was studying like the impact of, which is sort of topical now, of building new police stations in Colombia on like local crime. And that was just kind of crazy. I think it was like a triple difference kind of, he had a few models, but that was just like a fun project to work on. I always feel weird calling these things fun and interesting because they have like real life and death consequences for people. But yeah, it was, I don't know of a better word to describe it. Like, it was just crazy how you can like tease out these effects from like some pretty subpar data. Yeah.
It's interesting, and you know, at least
yeah, right. Yeah.
Mind-numbing data to have to work through. So back to some Harris stuff. Do you have any favorite courses that you took, or advice for courses to take? Any other specific faculty that you really enjoyed learning from or working with?
Yeah, I mean, I think as an MS CAPP student, like, of course I would make this plug, but like the 121 sequence was just incredibly helpful. That yeah, that was super valuable. I use the things I learned in that course like every single day at my job. Yeah, and even just, yeah, and even honestly, in kind of a weird way, even just the psychological mindset of like not being overwhelmed by a seemingly large problem and just breaking it down into small pieces and tackling them one at a time is almost like a mental resilience thing you learn while learning programming that is like super useful in like many aspects of one's life. Yeah. So I think that would be the main one. I took a couple environmental courses that were like sort of excuses to just like do more Eyal research stuff, but those were also fun at Harris. Yeah.
Were you involved in anything at Harris or outside of Harris that added to your skills or interest in this type of field besides the work with Eyal?
Oh, I mean, I was a handyman in Woodlawn. That's like helped pay my way. And yeah, I mean, the woman I worked for had like Section 8 tenants. And I think like another thing I just have sort of like side interest in is housing, which obviously has like a climate tie-in as well. And just, I think there's no better way than like understand all the like weird toxic stuff that goes into buildings than having to like tear apart a building. So that was definitely eye-opening. And also, you know, manual labor will make you grateful for your like desk job. So
while you were at school, did you know you wanted to work with the EPA, or did this just kind of happen, or was this like always the goal?
I mean, I was definitely interested in environmental work, but I feel like generally, if you're open to doing like lots of different kinds of work within a given like category, that's like good, because then you sort of like create more chances to get hired for yourself. So I applied to jobs doing like data science at like renewable energy companies and like battery storage startups. I think I applied to some like city forestry departments, which was kind of cool. But the EPA was definitely also on the list just because it was sort of environmentally related. Yeah.
Cool. So I want to get a little more background on one, what your undergrad was, and then why you chose to go to graduate school. Did you take some time off in between? Did you go straight on? And just kind of what that process looked like for you.
Yeah. So I went to a small liberal arts college called Kenyon College in Central Ohio. Not many people have heard of it, but I was basically a humanities major. I mean, I didn't pick a major until like junior year or something, but then realized like, oh, econ and statistics is useful, and took like a ton of classes my last 2 years. And then worked at the Brookings Institution in DC for 3 years, in the like Center on Children and Families, which I think no longer exists because it's been like folded into this whole like other program they have. But that was super fun. I mean, my boss is great, like former journalist, philosopher, just like kind of a crazy guy. But it was very like abstract, I feel. I mean, I got to do some cool like interviewing of people in these like education initiatives around the Eastern Seaboard. That was fun. But it was a little abstract. Like you'd sort of write some report and then throw it into the vortex of the internet and hope that like a lawmaker read it and like didn't do their like terrible idea. And I can count like on one hand the number of times they emailed us and like, actually, we won't do that idea we were thinking of. Yeah, so after that, I did something called the DRW Fellowship, which is in several US cities, but I did the one in Los Angeles, and that was a great experience, honestly, because they basically take 12 people who are interested in public policy and just stick them in a different job around the city every month. So I worked for LA's Metro Department for 3 months. What else ended up happening? I worked for a legal aid organization, foster youth. Worked for LAX, just like.
Wow, that's really cool.
Yeah, it was fun. If anyone like wants to talk about that, feel free to hit me up. I know the program's changed a little because of COVID, but it was a good experience.
What's it called again?
The CORO, the DRW Fellowship. I actually lived with one of the people I did it with. So, yeah,
that's cool. I'll
put
the link to that in the chat.
Yeah, and then I think to wrap this up a little bit, I think I just realized like if I wanted to do the sort of data science work I enjoyed, I needed to like get better at data science stuff. So there were really only 2 places like that seemed to have good data science public policy fellowships or degrees, and it was like CMU and Chicago. And I applied to both and went to Chicago.
Gotcha. That's a very cool experience. So we're wrapping up on our time of us just chatting. So one thing I like to usually ask all of you guys is a little bit about your future and like what you kind of envision for your career path, and then if you have any advice for students who are either starting to think about their futures or going to be graduating in a month or so, any advice there?
Oh man. Okay, I'll try to take those one at a time. Future stuff. I'm like, I just turned 30, which is, I'm like an old now. It's crazy. And I don't think anyone when they're 20 is like, I'm gonna work in refrigerants or whatever. But it's like kind of a niche policy area that like actually matters. And I like my bosses and coworkers, and I like living in DC. So I'm planning to stay here for a bit, especially because like one of the specific projects I'm working on like won't be fully implemented until 2027, which is like that's like a long time. And also, I mean, we don't need to get too much into HR stuff, but like there's a pretty strong incentive to stay at the federal government at least like 3 to 5 years for reasons we can talk about. Yeah, for reasons we can talk about. Having to do with like being hired later if you want to work there again, or like retirement stuff. But advice, yeah, okay, last part of the question. Definitely do like as many informational interviews as you can with just like people whose jobs you're interested in. A, because you'll learn a lot, and B, because those people will like, maybe if you like seem not totally off the rails to them, will like stand you a little bit when you like apply for a job that's open at their place. Yeah, I think I'll leave it there. Yeah.
So let's open up the floor. So if you have a question, raise your hand, and then I will unmute you and let you talk. And yeah, so I usually have people who are a little shy at first. So I have other questions that Pete and I will talk about. I'll keep an eye on the participant box to see if anyone's hand pops up. Let's see. So let's talk more about your work at EPA while we're waiting. Let's see. So I know you said you had coworkers that are of all different types of backgrounds. So I want to talk a little bit more about like what are some common career paths that your coworkers have. I know you can come from many different things and still be in the federal government. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about where your colleagues came from. They came from similar, data paths like you or not.
Yeah.
If you know.
Man. No, I do actually, I think I can take a stab at this. That's one of the cool things is like, they have all sorts of crazy backgrounds. Like, one of them like did this like early Internet of Things research project, like monitoring, using like small air quality monitors all around Chicago. That was like their previous job. I think he worked at Northwestern or something, and still teaches there actually, like on the side. We've had a lot of people come from like the nonprofit world in DC, like environmental nonprofits. I'm just thinking about people we've hired recently. Some of them like were hired straight out of college in like the 90s. So yeah, there's definitely a bit of an age gap where there's like a lot of people who are like in their like 40s and older, and then there's a lot of people in their like late 20s, early 30s. And I guess maybe that's partly a product of the fact that there was like no one was being hired for 4 years. So yeah, but it's a pretty diverse group. A lot of Peace Corps people come in. So yeah.
Okay. So I guess, can you talk a little bit more about, your big, is it legislation or whatever's coming up right now? Can you talk a little bit more about that and, really what that entails, and what that kind of timeline looks like? Because you said it doesn't end until 2027.
Sure. Yeah. I will try to answer this without going down a total rabbit hole. Yeah. And then I'll try to answer Usman's question, because I think I actually can maybe give an answer to this as someone that's like dabbled in a lot of stuff, like dabbled for all of my 20s. Okay. So in 2020, in sort of the lame duck session of the Trump administration, this, there was that sort of like mini energy bill thing that passed. And part of that was something called the American Innovation and Manufacturing Act of 2020, or the AIM Act. And oh man, okay. there's so many random details I could give about this, but I think the short version is that act does a lot of things, but one of the things it does is it creates a cap and trade program for hydrofluorocarbons, which are used for a lot of things, like blowing foam. If you have an inhaler, the thing that like aerosolizes the actual like medicine is often, I think, HFC 134A, which is also used in car air conditioning systems. Like the liquid in an air conditioning system that's like pumped through the system to actually like absorb heat and like push it outside is often HFC 1, or just HFCs in general. So like my window air conditioning unit takes HFC 410A. And just to give you a sense of scale with this, like, why should we care? I think there's like a couple estimates that like if we implement the cap and trade program correctly, and like other countries do as well, we'll avoid like 0.5 degree centigrade of global warming, just like freaking massive. I mean, it's huge. And even if that's like off by, 5 times, still an enormous amount of global warming avoided. Yeah, okay, so basically that law passed, and then we have this new statutory authority to implement this cap and trade system, and that's what we're doing right now. So we had to like decide how many people get like how many allowances in the cap and trade program, and then like actually give them the allowances. Make sure they're not like importing more than they have allowances for, or that other companies are importing stuff. So like one thing we do every day is like review customs data to look for illegal imports. And this is like a data science thing I'm working on right now. So yeah, I mean, I'll stop there because I could go on about this forever.
Cool. Usman, I'm going to have you ask your question then. So I'm going to allow you to talk.
Yeah. Hi guys, how are you?
Good, thanks.
Yeah, I'm from Pakistan. My name is Usman. Am I audible clearly?
Yep, we can hear you.
Yeah, I was saying that I was doing a degree in engineering, okay, electrical engineering, but I didn't find any interest there. The degree was not fascinating me at all. Okay? So I decided to go into economics because I had a course of engineering economics during my engineering degree, electrical engineering degree. Okay, so because of that course, I found my interest in economics. It was the very first time I was introduced with something of economics, supply and demand, and all the economics stuff. Okay, so at that time I decided that man, I should be doing economics. Okay, so I all of a sudden decided to enroll myself in economics from scratch, like again doing a bachelor's. And right now I'm in my 8th semester, going to complete my bachelor's in economics by this July. I am considering to pursue my career in engineering economics. I am applying in some programs in England, in UK, related to engineering, related to economics and energy, especially from Scotland region. So my question is, how do I convince the other person or the employee but regarding my degree career shift CN? This is my question.
Yeah, cool, thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of different ways we could take that question. So one would be like, can you afford to stay in school? If the answer is like, sure, then like, then sort of maybe the main cost is like an opportunity cost of like not getting experience, working in a job somewhere. But if you think that, if you can afford it and you think that going to more school is worth it, then yeah, maybe it makes sense. But I think one thing my aunt told me once was like, no one cares, very much about your like undergrad experience or like your school experience in general, like after your first job, because like your most recent employer or boss will like, that's going to be like the most meaningful feedback that like any future employer will hear. So I don't know. I mean, part of my part of my thought on that almost would be like, don't sweat it too hard. Like it's all good. And also I think there's a lot to be said for having like kind of being able to see a given problem from like multiple perspectives. Like the guy on our staff who is both a lawyer and an engineer, like he has a lot of perspective on problems we face that like someone who like only knew the engineering side like wouldn't have. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I guess that would be a couple quick thoughts. One other thing I would say, and maybe this goes back to like general advice for people currently at U of C. Like if you enjoy programming and data stuff, I would say like take more of those classes, because like that is a lot of what's gotten me hired at different jobs I've had, because those skills are still like kind of rare. I mean, it's changing. Like, I think my skill set, there are some like people graduating from undergrad right now that have my skill set, and I'm like kind of competing with them, which is tricky. But just generally, like, you'll have a huge leg up if you can tell your like potential employer that you like have some hard programming or data science skills.
Yeah, definitely. Right now, I'm also working as a research assistant in one of the leading research institute of Pakistan. And yeah, you are absolutely right regarding the data thing. And one more thing, when we talk about data, especially when you are an economics student, there is a long debate of we should learn skills or in R programming, or should we stick with this data? What you say
Oh,
regarding this?
oh man.
Sorry.
Okay, so it's no. That's interesting. So between R and Stata, uh, that's interesting. I mean, I use R in my job a lot because like it's open source. I don't have to pay for it. I assume EPA has Stata licenses, but I haven't like looked into that. And I think R has sort of sometimes a broader range of capabilities, although Stata lets you do more things like out of the box in terms of economics, so that's nice. Yeah, I don't know there's like necessarily a right answer there, but I think biologists and other like physical scientists use R a little bit more. The other one would be Python. Like, if you haven't learned any Python, like, I would definitely maybe at least have like some basic knowledge of Python, because that's super useful in a ton of different contexts.
I see, definitely. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions, other people? Otherwise, I just have two more about your experience right now. One, what new skills? Oh, well, how long have you been at the EPA? When did you start? Right after graduation, or has it been longer?
Yeah, no, yeah. It's been a whirlwind. So a couple different MS CAPP students, I think at this point, a couple different MS CAPP students have done this program I did after graduating from MS CAPP called DigiDems, which basically takes people with like programming or data skills and puts them on democratic campaigns for an election cycle, to like help the specific campaign. Also highly recommend that program. It was a lot of fun. I learned a ton. And working on a campaign, while like insane and like probably bad for my mental health, was like, it was cool. It was fun. But anyway, yeah, we lost. We did not win. So in sort of the waning days of the campaign, I was just like applying for jobs. So yeah, I applied in like November 2020, and then started the job in like February of 2021. So I've been here, about a year, but yeah, that's the other thing about federal hiring is
it's a long time.
yeah, definitely apply like while you have a job. Like, don't quit your job and then apply for federal jobs, because my hiring process was like fast. That was like unusually quick. Yeah, I know people who've taken like a year and a half to get hired, and it's like, that's pretty wild.
That is wild. So anyway, so you've been here a decent amount of time now. So my question was like, have you learned any new skills that you've developed, since taking this role? So you've had a good amount of time there.
I think a lot of it has been sort of interpersonal. It sounds sort of strange. That makes me sound like some sort of just social incompetent before I took this job. But yeah, we have like a lot of different stakeholders. So I mean, obviously the environment and like people, environmental groups, etc. But like the companies we sort of talk to and regulate vary a lot in terms of their like technological sophistication. Some of them have like 2 employees. Some of them are like basically like enormous chemical companies. So just like trying to figure out how to make regulations that achieve the environmental objectives without like totally disrupting people's like current businesses is like it's a challenge. Like, I don't know. Yeah. Right. Because you don't want to sort of be like, oh, don't worry about it. You don't have to do that, or you don't have to do that environmental requirement. But you also don't want to like, cost them like more money than needs to be spent to meet the objectives of the laws we implement.
All right, last question here, and I'll kind of wrap in, just gonna put something in the chat. What are some current issues and trends in this field that we should know or be aware of? And Usman says, please talk on the future of petroleum as energy also. So if you have thoughts on that.
There actually is a tie-in. There's a tie-in on this. Honestly, I could bring anything back to refrigerants. Okay, so like I said, HFCs, hydrofluorocarbons, are potent global warming gases. I think stop me if I already said this, but just, to give a sense of scale, like the substance, the refrigerant in like many like car AC systems, R134A, a pound of that emitted into the atmosphere has the same global warming impact as like 1,430 pounds of carbon dioxide. So it takes like very little of this stuff. Like there's one, HFC 23, which is used in like some kind of specialized processes. I think it has like a global warming impact over like 10,000 times that of a single equivalent amount of carbon dioxide. So these are being phased out, and in their place, some of the large chemical manufacturers have patents on these chemicals called hydrofluorolefins, which have slightly different chemistry than HFCs, which means they break down much faster in the atmosphere and don't like live forever in, the troposphere, warming the planet. So that's one direction things are going. Another direction is people actually using like natural refrigerants, and natural is sort of a weird word because it's like isobutane or propane. Like a lot of commercial refrigerators now are actually full of propane for the refrigerant. Our refrigerator just broke, and our landlord got us a new refrigerator that has isobutane in it. So there's like some people are using like flammable refrigerants, which is a whole new thing because you got to worry about like the safety of these things. Whereas HFCs are like, you can literally inhale them and they like won't hurt you. And then people actually, ironically, using like carbon dioxide for some refrigeration systems. Like some new supermarkets, the refrigerants, they actually use like CO2 as the refrigerant, which is sort of like a climate irony. And then all of these refrigerants have like upsides and downsides to their use. So I think that's sort of, if you're asking like, what's new in refrigerants? Like that's the answer. But at EPA specifically, more organizationally, I think, we're trying to like use data better. I think that's a big one, honestly, trying to like use data better and like digitize more things and not like require paper reporting, which is a thing some of parts of EPA still do. So,
just as a quick follow-up to that, as regular consumers, is there something we should be looking out for when purchasing things like refrigerators or all the other things that HFCs are in?
Oh man, I think I have to be careful what I say here. I should have said earlier, nothing I say reflects like the view of the EPA in general.
We can skip it if it's necessary.
No. I mean, I don't know. I honestly think this is more of a systemic thing. Like, yes, we could all sit there and like watch over the shoulder of our HVAC technician as they like repair our AC unit to make sure they don't just like vent the refrigerant into the atmosphere. They would not, I'm sure they wouldn't like that. Yeah, I think it really is. It's honestly more of a systemic thing. Yeah, although you can look for, if you don't want to buy like a piece of equipment that has HFCs in it, you can look on the side and it will say, if you open your refrigerator, there's a sticker on the inside and it will say what kind of refrigerant it takes. So yeah, if you're into consumer choice, you can do that. Yeah.
Good to know. Did you have any comments on the future of petroleum and energy?
No, yeah, that's kind of it actually.
Okay.
I mean, it's interesting because like so many things in modern life rely on oil, like, you know, like your Patagonia that has the synthetic fibers, that's all oil basically. But refrigerants are another example, like, and not just sort of propane, which is like obviously petroleum or like, you know, fossil fuel based. But the processes used to create all of these chemicals, a lot of them rely on petroleum products of various kinds. Yeah. So yeah, no, it's definitely like even the sort of like natural refrigerants like have a sort of fossil fuel tie-in. Yeah.
I saw this commercial recently that it's not energy related, but some type of fossil fuel. Somebody was saying how much you know, petroleum is in all of our products, and it was like, this is going to disappear if we don't use that, and you know, all of your normal things. Yeah. I don't remember what the commercials were, but yeah. Anyways, I think we're ready to wrap up unless there's any last minute questions. I want to thank Pete for being here and for chatting with us today. I do want to note that we have another career series coming out in May, on May 18th. We'll have Jordan Graham. He's working with Chairman Kerry Zielinski at the Illinois Commerce Commission. So that will be a nighttime career series. That'll be at 5:30. So if you're interested in that, register for that. Otherwise, that's it for me. Do you have any other parting words, Pete?
No, I'd say, you know, hit me up if you're interested in any of this stuff. Yeah, it's like, again, refrigerants are sort of like, and it's HFCs aren't just used for refrigerants, but it sounds sort of boring. It's actually kind of fascinating. Like the Montreal Protocol is like maybe the only UN resolution that was like totally ratified by all the parties, like, and certainly the only environmental one. So yeah, it's definitely one of those fun things where you like peek under the rug a little bit, and there's just so much more going on than you thought. So, yeah.
So if you are interested in connecting with Pete, just you can either email me and I can get you guys in touch. And yeah. All right. Thanks so much, Pete. Everyone have a great afternoon. It looks like it's sunny outside, so if you're in Chicago, be outside. But yeah. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day. Thanks, Pete.
Yeah.